You started, Rita.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nick Adams-King. I'm the Executive Member for Hampshire 2050 and Corporate Services, and welcome to my decision day this afternoon. With the exception of consideration of matters which are confidential or exempt, this decision day is currently being broadcast on YouTube via the County Council website. Let me welcome my Cabinet colleague, Zoe Huggins, who's with us. Also, Councillor Martin Todd, who is the opposition spokesperson, and Councillor Rob Cooper, who is the vice chair of the committee. I'm just trying to see whether Rob is here, actually. And Rob as well, sorry, and the chairman of the Hampshire 2050 Select Committee, Rob McAtter, is with us as well. We've got a couple of apologies. Those are from Councillor Alex Crawford, who's the Labour spokesperson, Councillor Malcolm Wallace, who is the our Green councillor from the Independent Group, and also from the Deputy Leader, Councillor Jan Warwick. We've got no deputations, and we've got no key decisions that are non-exempt and non-confidential. So straight on to the non-key decisions. The first one is the 2026-27 revenue budget savings and capital programme for Hampshire 2050. Sarah, I think, is going to introduce that for us, and I know this is looked at this morning at the Select Committee as well.
Yes, thank you. So 3 recommendations are proposed, which is to approve the revised 25-26 budget and the proposed 26-27 budget for Hampshire 2050. Also the SP26 savings and efficiencies, and then lastly the capital programme for Hampshire 2050. As you said, Nick, this has been through the Hampshire 2050 and Corporate Services Resource and Select Committee this morning, so I wasn't proposing to go through the numbers, but I did want to mention that, as you'll be aware, there is the integration of Hampshire 2050 taking place to a disaggregation between universal services and people and organisations. So we'll be reporting on that at year end and providing a reconciliation of the budget as recommended, ready for 26-27.
That's super, Sarah. Thanks very much. And just to explain for anyone watching, which is in the process of a bit of reorganisation here at the County Council in terms of the way that we organise ourselves internally, in part to be ready for devolution when it comes along, and also to rationalise some of the bits and pieces of the County Council, which will mean that there'll be some changes to the way in which we report the departmental parts of the county from next year onwards. Colleagues, we've got the recommendations there that we had a good conversation about it, or Select Committee had a good conversation about it this morning. Zoe, anything to add?
No, I'd quite like to hear Rob. Unfortunately, I wasn't there this morning, so it'd be good to hear from the committee's point of view. But I think it's worth most probably noting some of the complexities of it and the impact of reduction in government funding to our funding gap, for example. But in particular, obviously, where we are with the SP 25 and 26 savings programmes.
Yeah. So, Rob and Rod, I think whether you want to perhaps give us a bit of feedback on the committee's comments this morning.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. We had a pretty comprehensive discussion this morning about the 2 budgets, and felt that the savings projected looked reasonable in the light of the changes, and felt relatively robust about the state of the finances for the 26-27 year, given the level of reserves. The point was made that our BBR is higher than the deficit overall, and felt that obviously there's going to be full discussion about that in the budget coming up next month, but feeling for the budget for these 2 areas that we were fairly comfortable with the level of savings projected and with the projections that are contained in the report. And it was unanimously supported this morning.
Super, thanks. And Martin, anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, we had a brief, something that arose out of the discussion. It didn't change the budget, but we touched on the fact that versus the original savings programme, the savings from office accommodation had gone back, backwards. And it's important, I realise, and it was highlighted that work is going on, but there is a feeling within Winchester in particular, where quite a lot of offices have been emptied out, that they've been sitting there sort of in limbo, unused for too long. So I think that is something that should, it would be important to keep a focus on. I think the second thing that we touched on was that in practice, there is a decision coming, and it will be useful to get transparency on this as soon as possible, that relates to the extra cost of local government reorganisation, which will be done in this group. And as I understand, it will be a subject to a separate recommendation. But I think it's important that the public are aware of, and that we have a chance to scrutinise and discuss the costs that we're being asked to take on, and the impact that that's going to have on the organisation. So there was a slight sense in which, yes, what's in front of us is fine, but as soon as we can get that fuller picture of what the government's decision about reorganisation has meant, I think the better it will be for all, and the more transparency we can have about the full cost and complexity, so the public are aware of what we're being driven into, will be useful.
Thanks. So I think just on that second point, Martin, we've been very clear about the fact that we think that obviously this all depends upon the final configuration that the government give us, and the sooner they give us that, the better, because that means that the point we will begin to get underway with work towards that transformation, and the longer we leave it, the less time there is to undertake that transformation. As we noted when we had our extraordinary council a couple of weeks ago, we know that our estimation of the cost of reorganisation is going to be between 80 and 120 million, dependent upon the configuration that eventually comes about, and that's for the system. And until such time as we've got a better idea of what that, or better ideas, till we know what that looks like, it's very difficult to then work out what that's likely to be. But clearly that's something that it'll be a job for the next council now that we know that elections are going ahead. That it'll be for them to begin to understand that process. One of the jobs that we need to start thinking about as part of our preparation for the next 2 years, though, is to work out how we will bear, what is undoubtedly going to be a cost of reorganisation from this organisation's point of view. But as I say, that's something I think now for the next council to consider rather than this one. Jack, I think you want to come in.
I just wanted to confirm, for the purposes of people who weren't at select committee this morning, that we confirm there is a fairly extensive programme around office accommodation and disposals, and that I can confirm since select committee that the Winchester estate is there's nothing that isn't already in the process of being disposed of in accordance with that programme.
Super. Okay. Sorry, Martin, your hand's gone up again. Is it?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I absolutely get the point that once the button is pushed in what we're currently being told is March, that there will be the actual process of implementation will be very expensive. I suppose there is the point that we are getting instructions for substantial amounts of work that have to be delivered before that point, even now. So I absolutely take your point about the £100 million or the 80 or the 120, all of them shocking figures. But it's not something that, the work isn't going to wait even until next May and the results of the elections, sadly. So that was why I think it's important that we get public clear about what this is costing us sooner rather than later.
I look forward to your support in berating Steve Reed about the fact that we still don't know what that might look like and where we need to go. So, it's clearly something that's on all our minds. But as soon as we get that configuration, then we can do something about it. So we've got the recommendations there in paragraph 5, on page 5, in paragraph 1 and subpoints 1 to 3, I'm very happy to confirm those. Sarah, thanks so much for all the work on that. I know it's all a bit of a moving feast at the minute, so tying things down is a little tricky. So that's great. So our next one is another finance one, which is the corporate services bit of it. So it's the same title, but for corporate services, not Hampshire 2050. So same process, I think, Sarah.
Yes, I'll say it again for the record. So an identical set of recommendations, which is to recommend acceptance of the revised 25-26 budget, the proposed 26-27 budget, alongside the SP26 savings set out in Appendix 2, and also the addition of an element of a capital programme, which is contained in a later appendix at paragraph 64.
Super. And I mean, similar jewellery. Rob, when we were in select committee this morning, this kind of was taken as part of the first piece of work, really, wasn't it? So, really want to add anything to that which you said earlier?
It was discussed. There's a report on both items together. So what I said on the first item really covers the second item as well. Thanks, Nick.
Super. And Zoe, Martin, anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, just to say, to wrap both of them in some reflection on some earlier comments. Obviously, we are going through a very uncertain, unknown time and moving parts of it, and the need to close, obviously, the funding gap. So I just want to acknowledge the good work that Andy and his staff have done, and Jack in her area as well. It's very difficult, and with those more moving parts, and it's good to hear the select committee's debate, and obviously that they've approved the budgets and the continuing capital investment where it's needed, because we still need to look at efficiency savings and transformation and continuing improvement. So yeah, they would be my comments.
Martin?
Yeah, and I think even from our point of view, this is a pragmatic set of changes. Again, you know, when we're looking at the world of IT, life could be about to get very expensive, just because, again, there'll be lots of IT systems being brought together. I think it was important perspective, which I think Councillor Huggins touched on a bit earlier, that the fair funding settlement doesn't solve our financial problems as a council. It's made the financial position of several districts significantly worse even than was expected, and I don't think we probably need sooner rather than later to almost be taking a combined view as to quite where we've ended up as a result. Some areas are better off, some areas are worse off, but it will have a disproportionate effect across the entire area depending on the configurations we end up in, and we shouldn't lose sight of that. And yes, I mean, I think officers have come up with a pragmatic set of changes, given what none of us must forget is an extraordinarily difficult financial situation for local government generally, but Hampshire and many of its the councils in Hampshire as a whole.
And it's quite apparent that you know, across the entire piece, you're exactly right. The impact on us is, you know, significant. The impact on the Isle of Wight is even worse. And for some of the rural districts, yours included, it's really not good at all. And so the impact then on how that feeds into what those new councils look like is a really important factor too when we begin to work it through. And once we know what that looks like, I would suggest that there's quite a bit of work for us then to start doing to work together to explain what the cumulative impact is going to be on some of those new council areas. A similar backdrop in the sense that it's paragraphs 1, points 1 to 3. This time on page 27, they're essentially the same recommendations without corporate services as the first lot. So I'm very happy to agree with those. Sarah, you know, again, thank you so much for all your work on this.
Thank you.
It's a tricky time for us all, but we still continue to find ways by which we can save some money, which is helpful to everything. So item 3 is Chief Officer Delegation Register. That's on pages 49 to 80. And and Jack, I think, is going to introduce it.
I think Emma's going to do it for me.
Okay, sorry, Emma.
I'm sure Jack would be very happy to as well. This is a short administrative paper. You announced at the start of the meeting that a restructure of the organisation took place, came into effect earlier this week on the 19th. This paper is just to reallocate delegated decisions that have already been delegated to chief officers to rehouse them in their new departments or new directorates. So the report contains a couple of appendices. So Appendix 1 is a delegation of those decisions that are moving to, the functions are moving to universal services. So those are the decisions in relation to economy and skills, strategic transport and spatial planning. And Appendix 2, and those are asked to be redelegated to the Director of Universal Services. Appendix 2 deals with decisions relating to the functions that are moving over to people and organisation. So that relates to land and assets and policy and some policy functions as well. Nothing further to say on the report.
Sorry,
recommendations.
My temporary silence was based upon the fact I put myself on mute and couldn't get myself off. No, that's brilliant, and that kind of feeds back to what I was just saying a bit earlier on about the way that we are restructuring ourselves at the minute. So I'm assuming, colleagues, this is a relatively uncontroversial bit of housekeeping for us, although Martin's got something to say.
Yeah, I mean, just a minor point. It will be useful when the full package of housekeeping is completed and we can see how it all works together. Obviously, this is a very sensible thing to be doing. I think there will be an interesting discussion about how scrutiny works, make sure there's an appropriate balance of workload between the committees and we've got the right number of committees in the right place. But obviously, this makes sense. And frankly, a lot of us never really understood. I mean, aside from anything else, the Hampshire 2050 name for a function and directorate was not at all clear to members of the public, and even, dare I say it, quite a few councillors as to what exactly it meant. So if we're moving to a more understandable system, that can only improve transparency and accountability.
No, exactly. And as we just mentioned, we touched upon this morning, it's something that we need to put through council. So that will all be resolved in the February council, and the committee of which Rob is currently the chair, and you and Rod are members, will clearly stay in place and still have its role and its function, but it needs to just change. Its name needs to change, and it just needs to match the new departmental responsibilities, and also the various cabinet responsibilities need to be slightly rejigged to take into account the changes that are being taking place. Rob, Rod, Zoe, all happy? Nothing to add?
Yes. Nothing to add at all.
Super, thanks. So in this case, there are some recommendations in paragraph 2 and 3, in paragraphs 2 and 3 on page 49. I'm very happy to agree those. And so item 4 is the many down update, pages 81 to 94. Now this says Emma to present. I think that should be Jack. But I know that Jack will pass very quickly to Louise, just saying.
Thank you, Nick. That was rather mischievous of you, but yes, it is indeed Louise. I'm going to hand straight over to her.
Apart from the fact that Louise is on mute.
You're on mute, Louise.
I turn myself off because my dog sometimes barks. I do apologise. So this report is about one of our largest opportunities in the Strategic Land Programme relating to land west of Basingstoke that both the County Council and the Borough Council hold jointly, known as Many Down. I'm not looking to go through the detail because we had quite a good discussion at Chairman's briefing, I think, Nick, around the detail of this. So what I wanted to do is just to draw the attention to two things. One is that this report is a non-key decision, but sits within the non-exempt and the exempt sections of the agenda. So the main report is in the non-exempt, but we have commercially sensitive information in relation to the business plan and the financial position of the authority relative to this particular project that sit within the exempt part of the agenda. So that's the first sort of navigation piece. I think the other thing to say is that there are 3 recommendations that are set out in paragraphs 5 to 7. And since we met with you and briefed you last week, the recommendation in paragraph 7 has been slightly amended to reflect some circumstances around the budget envelope available to the county council for various activity and how that might be perhaps repurposed within that budget envelope. And I think the other thing to say is, although we confirmed verbally at our chairman's briefing, we've now included that Jack Broughton is taking over in her role as Director of People and Organisation rather than her individual as a person, taking over from the Director of H2050 in relation to the 2 joint venture boards that sit in relation to Many Down North. And that was to be confirmed when we had the last version of the report. Otherwise, the report as it was, and we shared and discussed with you.
Super. So the one that's great, Louise. Thank you. And I'm sorry, it was slightly cheeky of me, but Louise is our font of knowledge for all things Many Down. There is, I should mention that there are some exempt appendices to this report. And if we want to talk to them, colleagues, then we'll need to go into exempt session because of the confidential information that's included within them. But Zoe, any comment to make?
No, I don't. Obviously, we've followed this journey for a little while now, so no additional comments. And Louise's summary there concludes some of the points and amendments from the briefing and previous. Thank you.
And Rob and Rod, any comment?
Yeah, nothing from my side.
Thanks. And Martin?
Yeah, just an observation, and I don't know if this relates to the council as landowner or as the council as a strategic planner. But there's a lot of discussion about fairly major developments in that part of Hampshire, the sort of A303 M3 intersection, and probably a sort of 3 or 4 mile radius in all directions. The government talks a lot now in the NPPF about a kind of vision-led approach to infrastructure and planning. So rather than, let's put a load of houses on a map and then see what infrastructure we need to make it work, trying to kind of get ahead of it and say what would an ambitious and visionary approach to infrastructure enable us. So I suppose my question to the team is to say, is that kind of thinking going on? Because if we're in the world of how do we ameliorate, a watch of housing in a particular place, rather than how do we make this whole area work properly, do we need to be thinking more ambitiously in terms of what our asks might be of government or of the new combined authority in terms of transport infrastructure? I suppose my question is that discussion going on? Because it feels like it would be quite an important one.
I can try and answer it to say that in relation to Southern Many Down, of which we own part, the paper sets that out, we have had an active and ongoing dialogue with MHCLG and Homes England for many years around some of the really big ticket items of infrastructure. So something like the strategic transport corridor that will go through the site to support sustainable transport strategies for that development is a high cost and is likely to need some contribution, even if that's advanced funding that's then repaid. And of course, we've done the same on Many Down North, and the paper references that there's a Homes England fund and loan coming to the developer, again, to provide infrastructure early and to deliver it in a coordinated way. What I can't say is that those discussions are extending to perhaps Popham or other things, because that's not the remit of the landowning side of this particular project. This is a landowning report that we're reporting on, not the strategic planning part of it. So those conversations will be held by other colleagues.
And I think to reassure you, Martin, in terms of the conversations that are going on about the combined authority, and indeed, the reason I dipped out of the select committee this morning was to go and have a meeting with the other 3 upper tier leaders in Southampton and Portsmouth and the Isle of Wight about how that that works once the combined authority is established. All of that work that is going on to prepare for that is focused upon how infrastructure can be delivered to alongside these developments, not also to support them in terms of their sustainability. And that's not just talking about Manydown, but you're right. You're right to talk about Popham, and dare I mention Mitchell Devereux alongside it as well. And there is whilst there's a little bit of uncertainty about some of those sites, and in fact what we're talking about are developments that probably will not come forward for 10 to 15 years at least, the developments in that part of the county, or indeed in other parts of the county, need absolutely to have the infrastructure provided alongside them, which is exactly what we're doing down on the M27 for Wellbourne, and all the work that we've done there. And that needs to be a blueprint, I think, for how we look at infrastructure to support development, particularly in terms of that highway infrastructure going forward. So it is part of the preparation of the combined authority, that conversation, and it is also something that is obviously at the forefront of our mind when we're looking at land and planning. And so that's to reassure you that's all happening, but much of it will need to await the delivery of the delivery of the combined authority, and then the arrival of the mayor when the full funding gets underway. So if everyone is content with that bit of it, then the recommendations are there recommendations? Yes, sorry, in paragraphs 5 to 7 on page 82. And I just need to confirm that I've taken into account the exempt appendices when considering the decision, and I do not feel the need to go into an exempt session to consider this further. I will therefore happy to agree the recommendations to the board. And Louise, thank you so much. I know this has been a labour of love for a number of years, and it preceded me and will no doubt succeed me in terms of who's making the decisions for you. So that's the end of the public part of our decision day. We've got one more item that we need to consider, but it involves some confidential information that I therefore need to say that I agree that the press and public be excluded from the decision day during the following items of business, and as it is likely, in view of the nature of the business to be transacted or the nature of the proceedings, that if members of the public were present during these items, there would be a disclosure to them of exempt information within paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, and further that in all the circumstances of the case, the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information for the reasons that are set out in the reports. So thank you for watching if you have been, and could we please turn the broadcast off?